A warning to our audience, this next segment contains descriptions and images of police violence. We turn now to Mississippi, where 6 white former police officers who called themselves the Goon Squad have pleaded guilty to raiding a home and torturing 2 black men earlier this year, after first trying to cover up their actions. Some of the officers face life in prison. On January 24th, court records show the deputies raided a home in Braxton, Mississippi, after a white neighbor of one of the officers called them to complain there were black men staying there. The officer texted the others, quote, "Are y'all available for a mission?" That night, without a warrant, the officers burst into the home, handcuffed, beat, tasered the 2 men, Michael Corey Jenkins and Eddie Terrell Parker. Also sexually abused them with a sex toy with shouting racial slurs. One of the officers put a gun in Jenkins' mouth for a mock execution and pulled the trigger. The bullet lacerated Jenkins' tongue, broke his jaw, exited through his neck. This is U.S. Attorney Darren LaMarca last week announcing federal charges against the former officers for the attack.
Is related to the torture of 2 black men. CNN's Ryan Young reports on the unthinkable violence that unfolded just this year in Mississippi. And a warning, this story contains graphic content.
They allegedly call themselves the Goon Squad, a group of 6 white former Mississippi law enforcement officers giving themselves that moniker because of their alleged willingness to use excessive force and not to report. Now they've pleaded guilty to federal charges related to an assault that, according to a charging document, included nearly 2 hours of torture, physical, racist, and sexual abuse on 2 black men after a white neighbor complained. Several black males have been staying at the property, and the neighbor had observed suspicious behavior. The officer who received the complaint directed an investigator to take care of it. On January 24th, 6 law enforcement officers entered victims Eddie Parker and Michael Jenkins' home without a warrant.
Handcuffing the victims behind their backs and using racial slurs and derogatory language when yelling at the victims, discharging a firearm in order to scare and intimidate the victims, holding them down and pouring cooking oil, milk, alcohol, and chocolate syrup on their faces and into their mouths, forcing them to painfully and involuntarily ingest those liquids, striking one of the victims with objects including a metal sword, a piece of wood, and a wooden kitchen implement, kicking one of the victims in the ribs, tasing the victims dozens of times with department-issued tasers, and stealing personal belongings from the house.
It ended with Jenkins getting shot in the mouth, the bullet lacerating his tongue, breaking his jaw, and exiting out of his neck. For months, there was a lot of doubt about the official account of what took place, the Mississippi Department of Public Safety releasing a statement the day after the incident saying only the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation is investigating an officer-involved shooting, but that didn't encapsulate the horror. In July, I spoke to Parker, Jenkins, and Jenkins' mother and toured the home where the crimes occurred.
I crawled here to this spot, and they started beating me here and tasing me. As you can see, blood spots and all. And my blood spots there.
Jenkins' injuries make it difficult for him to speak.
It hurt. I'm embarrassed.
Has anyone from the department ever reached out to you and apologized? Have they ever asked for anything at all?
Rankin County Sheriff Brian Bailey spoke at a press conference about the incident in late June.
I believe in my heart that this department remains one of the best departments in our state, and I'm committed to doing everything in my power to keep this department on a correct path moving forward.
Yesterday, he issued an apology and said he didn't fully understand the gravity of the crimes committed until recently. Federal authorities began their review in February. They, along with the state of Mississippi, were able to secure guilty pleas of all accused.
The convictions of 6 officers in the Rankin County assault case is a win for the state of Mississippi. Former Rankin County deputies Christian Dedman, Hunter Elwood, Brett McCaplin, Jeffrey Middleton, and Daniel Opdyke plus former Richland police officer Joshua Hartfield all pleaded guilty to several federal charges yesterday. Those charges include conspiracy against rights and obstruction of justice. The 6 officers beat and tortured Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker at a Braxton home back in January. Representative Chris Bell chairs the Mississippi Legislative Black Caucus. He says the next step needs to be a full probe into the Rankin County Sheriff's Office and any other agencies whose officers use similar tactics.
The Department of Justice came down and did the investigation and made these guilty pleas happen. Without them, our state has been silent. The Attorney General's office has been radio silent with respect to these crimes that were committed against these individuals. And it just further shows that it takes the federal government to come in and do the job where the state of Mississippi should have been able to do it on their own.
The 6 officers will be sentenced in federal court in November. They also face state charges.
Not only did they brazenly commit these acts, but after inflicting serious bodily injury by firing a shot through one of the victim's mouths, they left him lying in a pool of blood, gathered on the porch of the house to discuss how to cover it up. What indifference, what disregard for life.
A life that will never be the same for either of these 2 men.
It's hard to stand right here, knowing, what happened right here. Justice is what it all boiled down to. I'm just like them, whether they're in uniform or not.
Tonight we're hearing from the victims for the first time after 6 former Rankin County officers pleaded guilty to assaulting them.
Now, in an interview with NBC News, Michael Corey Jenkins and Eddie Terrell Parker, along with attorney Malik Shabazz, recounted the abuse and torture they endured at the hands of those former Rankin County officers. Jenkins saying there was no compromising or talking with the officers that night in January. He said they came there to do what they did. Both men say they believe they were targeted because they are black. Jenkins and Parker were asked what penalty the former officers should receive.
Oh, I think they should get punished, maximum. I mean, everything, that they will put, in the law that states, this right here is how you should conduct yourself. They did that to the opposite, So I think they should get positively the maximum.
Yeah, ain't no telling how many people they done did this to and lied on and planted guns and planted drugs and beat and killed that we don't know about.
So we won that count.
5 of the men are former Rankin County deputies. They are Brett McAlpin, Jeffrey Middleton, Christian Dedman, Hunter Edward, and Daniel Updike. Joshua Hartfield is a former Richland police officer.
After the attack, Michael Corey Jenkins was actually charged with a felony based on methamphetamine the officers said they found in the raid. But records show that was a lie, and the charge was dropped. In fact, the deputies planted drugs to devise an excuse for the raid and also stole surveillance video from the house. The Associated Press found the deputies were linked to at least 4 violent attacks on black men since 2019. 2 of the men died.